All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to do an episode. We've got a special episode looking at the tournament experience in the old world, specifically in Sydney, but off the back of a tournament that just happened on the weekend a couple of days ago. Got Alex here as normal, but also joined by two other guys from the tournament, Alisdair, who some people might recognize from a previous episode, and Alex, who we'll call Chaos Alex, to differentiate the Alexes. But we're not going to go into battle reports here. We're just going to go into the experience of an old world tournament. The scene is still new, so just checking in on the scene and seeing how these tournaments are operating and what a player who doesn't go to these events can expect, because as one of them, they're a bit daunting for people who haven't gone. So it'd be good to get some insights from people who are actually playing at these games. So, Alistair, we might go to you first. You were on a couple days ago on the pod going through your 1500 point Dark Elf list.
Yes.
Why don't you just tell everyone how you go about preparing for tournaments like these, if you have played at them before, or any advice for people that haven't?
Sure. Yeah, I suppose this was a really fun event. I suppose just to underline initially, this is the first old world event that either Chaos Alex or I have been to, and I was very glad that it was a smaller sort of type environment with a whole lot of newer players. I think it was a really valuable one for us and for a lot of the other guys who sort of came along who weren't really sure about a lot of rules queries or really how the game is supposed to be paced or played or anything else, to go into an environment like this where there was plenty of time. It was 1500 points and most of the rounds were about 3 hours, with a little bit of variation given that we went a bit late into the night. But the tables, the organizers, I should say, did a fabulous job with the tables, with the rounds. They chose a great set of missions. They made sure every table was set up in a really fair and equitable way. I think Alex will talk about that in a second. But it was really great. Both of us are, in the distant past, ex competitive players, if you call us that. I think we've been to a couple of the big tournaments, but again, we're looking sort of 10 years ago, probably at this point. Both of us have small kids now, so it's been a really long time since either of us have engaged in a big environment. So this was a really good one, just to get down, to do a bit of theory hammer in the background, think about the things that we've been able to play against each other in our sort of limited pool, and what might work and what would be interesting to play, and really get into the thick of it again in a tournament environment that was really hospitable, really lovely to be a part of.
And Chaos Alex did touched on it. You guys used to play competitively before. Was this your first old world tournament, and what was your experience like?
It was definitely the first old world tournament, and talking about things like competitive 40K, if you go back 10 years, you'd go to an event and everyone was playing almost the same list, and it was just drawing the player, playing the same game of chess over and over again. This is absolutely not what this event's experience was. We had a great variety of lists, which you guys went through in your video beforehand. But I think the strongest undercurrent that people probably took away from the day is that everyone who came to the event had a brilliant time. As Elsa said, the TOs did a great job in organizing tables, timers, terrain maps, etc. But ultimately, it comes down to, we all have young kids, we all have families. Do we want to take the time and expend the energy and effort to actually attend an event? Perhaps use that one day that we get a month or 2 months, depending on how many kids you have, to go to something like this. And I can astoundingly say the answer is yes. And that will be a concurrent theme through probably all the commentary today, because at the end of the day, we're just trying to have a good time. I like to classify myself as a social competitive gamer, as Alistair said. We're there to play strong lists, but I'm certainly not there to make sure that my opponent goes home feeling like they've wasted an entire day, because I know they're probably in the same boat that I am.
Yeah, I guess that is the fear of most players, particularly new players to the game, and someone like myself who's kind of dialed into the online chats about it, the meta and dragons turning up and stomping everyone. You know, that's not necessarily how, as you said, I like to spend my one Saturday that I'm get out every couple of months to do something. So I can see why people would be put off on it. But Alex, brother Alex, this time, this is your first old world tournament. You're a long time gamer, so these are kind of your people. How do you find the tournament? What did it lead up? Sorry, did it live up to your expectations?
Definitely lived up. It was beyond my expectations. I think, as you say, my people in different ways. I've had a love-hate relationship with gamers, I guess, throughout my whole life. Having people who needed them to make a livelihood, but also needed them to play games with, that I adored. But I think that, yeah, as Alisdair said up from the top, the equity of the event is something that would strike me as probably unique in a way that, if this, as I heard, was the first time these guys had run a tournament, they did a better job than anything I've seen for a long time. I was talking to Paddy about going to Magic Pro Tour qualifiers that were really tight. They're essentially run by employees. That was how efficient I felt like this was. A lot of details were taken care of. So often when I was in a position before and running these types of things, like you're thinking about the experience of the players, but you're doing it from a sense of trying to make money from them. And in this sense, I think that they were looking at just the idea that different types of people could come to this type of event and have a great time. And I feel like that's true. I'm probably more competitive, and I'm trying. In that pre-poll, I had said I'm playing to win. Like that's just how I play. 2.5 hours, but before I had 3 great opponents. I had no issues with sportsmanship. I hope they had none with me. And I felt like as we went around the room, everyone was really ecstatic about being part of something like this that they'd probably just been thinking about since the game had come out.
Yeah, it's definitely a daunting experience, I think, for people who have not experienced it before. But we may as well stick with you, Al, because this is your Lizardmen on the table against Dwarfs, your game 2, I think you said. Shout out to
game 1. This is game 1.
Sorry.
But yeah, I'm going to go into detail greatly later with some of the ins and outs and took photos of every turn, like some of the battle reports we've been doing. But just in general, I had a bit of a different experience where the players I played sort of did well, which is what I wanted, really, to play against people who were trying to win as well. I had never played Dwarfs before and got to play them twice. Overall, was sort of just excited at the start to hopefully get a win, and was relieved in the first one when I did, which I thought, having known the matchup in advance and the scenario, I was in a bit of trouble. And then after that, because I drew Dwarfs again with a sort of tighter list, but on a more favourable scenario, knew that I sort of had the edge, but tended to be a bit more of an exhausting game. And Alisdair actually helped me out with a very, very funky rule situation, which I'll try to break down in a couple of weeks. Finally, I played one of the other undefeated players who beat me at the end, and that was good as well. And I was a bit cooked, to tell you the truth, by the end of the event. The Lizardmen are a funny list for people to play against, where you roll a lot of dice early, don't roll a lot late. It means that people ride the emotional wave with you, but at the end, they're sort of clawing it all back, and it becomes a bit desperate. And to my opponent's credit, particularly, there wasn't any wavering or gaminess at the end. There was still that sort of spirit of trying to get the right result over the 2 hours, and for everyone to walk away satisfied.
And shout out to you as well, just while it's on screen, winning Best Painted for your Lizardmen army, which was a testament to it. I think it's an awesome looking army. Definitely stands out with the poppy orange blue colors. But you can hang that medal in your older son's room now. Show it off.
It's in my daughter's bedroom at the moment. All is forgiven.
Yeah, well done. We'll move on to this because Chaos, Alex, this is your army, your Shagoth Dragon Ogre army coming up against Dark Elves game 1. But walk us through your experience on the tabletop generally.
Yeah, so I think to echo some of the comments, I had 3 really great top tier opponents the whole day. 10 out of 10 for sports, 10 out of 10 for enjoyment on there. Win or loss, we just had a great time. But yes, this is game 1 against John, who is also one of the tournament organizers that was actually playing in the event. This is the big bad, as Alisdair has been trying to convince people about in the WhatsApp group for about 2 weeks. Of the 2 Dragon Ogres and the Shager himself, who arguably is a big bad, which we can go into in a bit of a highlight reel later. But yeah, look, I think overall, no issues in any of the games. The game functions. Do you know what I mean? There's no need to go and flip through a rule book all the time. The resources that we have available at our fingertips are fantastic. We have the TOW app to quickly reference rules. I use the Old World Builder because it has a game view at the end of every game where you can quickly calculate your scores. So overall, coming into these games, I knew that we could actually settle down a bit and think about how we were going to play things and go through it. But game 1 was a disaster for me. I definitely came up against a much stronger opponent who knew much more about the rules. Credit goes out to John, who held my hand very delicately whilst destroying my army and taking it to pieces one by one. I think he had a plan because, again, he thought this was quite a strong list. And let's just say my plan was not as effective as his. So lots of learnings out there. Loved playing John in that game. He bought me a beer afterwards, which was a great start to the day.
No, that's good. He's at least a gentle lover then. That's nice. Alisdair, I don't have a photo of one of your matchups, but I'll just keep sifting through them and you can just share your experience on the tabletop. How did you go?
Sure, for good reason, because I had one fabulous game. So I look, in all fairness, I suppose, to go back to my point around equity and how this gets set up in a 16-player tournament, with a certain number of pairings. You've got 3 matches. You've got equal chance, if you're doing Swiss pairings at each rank, to be paired against anyone who's at the same sort of win-loss rate as you. And it just so happened that both of the times that I was paired following my first game, I happened to be paired with people who'd gotten significantly more victory points than I had, to put it lightly. So my first game was fabulous. I suppose a big call out to Josh. He was such an entertaining opponent. We 100%. Chaos Alex got to play him as well in game 2. So we both got to sort of have a bit of a chat and have a really good gaming experience. And it was one of those quintessential, this game can be so fun. If things go wrong, if your opponent is behaving with, humor and grace, it doesn't matter what happens. This can be a really great experience. And it ended up being quite a tight game in the end as well. But it was just so entertaining, and it really sort of set me up in a positive way for the rest of the day. Game 2, I got the infamous game for the day. I matched up against our Wood Elf player. And I think there was a little bit of an experience differential between myself and them. But, I made a mistake in my deployment that ended up costing me that game, and I conceded in turn 2. It was very quick. It wasn't particularly pleasant, but it did mean that after about half hour of gameplay, I got to go and watch everybody else's game 2s and have a bit of chat about rules and see sort of some of the different things that are going on. So one of the soft benefits of that, and I suppose, having gamed for so long and actually having had children, I suppose the blow was a little bit more mollified than I was expecting. Didn't hit me quite so hard psychologically as perhaps it might have about 10 years ago, where I would have gone, this is the biggest waste of my day and blah, blah, blah. No, it was interesting, and if I never have to play a Wood Elf player again, I'll be glad. But
or just become one.
yeah,
Or just become one.
Yeah, that's right.
or just
Have
become
freedom,
one.
join
Yeah,
them.
maybe that's the answer. But game 3 again, I drew a really experienced opponent, which was really good actually, because it helped me refine my understanding of the rules quite a bit more. It meant, you know, obviously he had a bit more of a plan about how to deal with armies like mine than I had to deal with armies like his. But at the same time, you know, we got our shots in, and it ended up being a minor loss as far as these things go. So really valuable experience in that fight. Fabulous experience in the first game, and I suppose the second game is just chalk one up to these things happen.
Yeah. Well, so we touched on a little bit with like list building and stuff, and Chaos, Alex, you touched on it, where your Shaggoth ended up being the big bad of the tournament. Across the lists, from memory, there was only one dragon, right? And it was a Sun Dragon.
One dragon.
That's right.
And there was, I think, a Manticore, which was in
John had a Manticore. John had a Manticore, and I might argue that the 2 Necrosphinxes were also some of the scariest things in the tournament that I was praying not to face.
Yeah. Tomb Scorpions, the other big one that popped up out of the Tomb Kings list. 70 points, had to have a toughness 5 construct with killing blow. That was one of my least favorite parts of the third game. Yeah.
Oh, how did the Shaggoth go, being at the apex of the big bad list, or near it?
So you know, look, there's a lot of commentary in our little chat about the performance of the Shaggoth, and Chris, who's my round 3 opponent. You know, he's actually one of my good mates and Alice's good mate. So my game 3 was actually probably game 4 of Chris and I playing each other in that exact matchup, and the Shaggoth has actually performed the same way every time, where he's very much designed as a dragon brawler, you know, and I built him to think, okay, well, if I'm not going to bring a 700-point dragon, which I absolutely did not want to do, I better bring something that can at least go toe-to-toe with some of the big bads. Now, what I actually ended up building was something quite offensive and defensive at the same time. You know, he's weapon skill 6, he's got slug skin, so pretty much everything in the game is hitting him on 5s in combat. He's toughness 5, which is, you know, average for a monster of that size. But he comes with a 3+ armor save and a 5+ ward save with 6 wounds, which means that if you're not careful, he can tank a lot and end up hitting you with effectively up to 9 attacks, including his stomps. And yes, he's got a great weapon, but he's got inbuilt armor bane. I think it stacks up to -5 in some points when you roll 6s. So look,
this is why I want to get one, Paddy. $100. I'm gonna do it.
Look, and he's cheap for his points. He's definitely got to go up. But you know, you point him at the behemoth. You know, I think in game 3 against Chris, you know, he was a one-time fighting a Gorger, a Thunder Tusk, killed them both, then took on the Slaughter Master, killed him. But you know, probably shout out to John, whose greatest moment of the game was face tanked 5 wounds off the Shaggoth on his Pendant of Caliph, causing me to lose combat, flee, and be run down by the Manticore. So he's not unkillable, but I certainly think that he is the big bad of that list.
Yeah. I want to touch briefly, because this one shows it. Alex, you had a bit, brother Alex, you had a bit to say about the terrain after this. This is the square-based, like 3 lots of 2 impassable, 2 woods, 2 hills, and it's mirrored on either side. What was your experience there? And generally, how do you think terrain plays in the game?
Look, I was deeply impressed. I'd spoken to John before the event about their plans. I'd seen their preparations, and just having that organizing background, was terrified that we might turn up to just a puddle of styrofoam or something and then feel guilty that I hadn't helped, and all of those emotions. But I could not sort of fault just for the reasons I play. And you know, we've had discussions in the background about terrain and probably had boards that were too open. And I played on this one, which was difficult visually, to tell you the truth, but the scenarios themselves offered a lot of play. And I think it mattered. Like, the only practice game I'd had at that points limit, I got destroyed by a gun line where really nothing made it across the table, and came away thinking, oh, it can't be games like this where I've got nothing to do. And against dwarves, I was able to use the terrain quite well, and I think it adds an element when it's done well to the game. And if it's crowded, it really detracts from the game. But if you're just marching across and smashing each other, it's also not really what the game's about. I think the square-based scenarios have done a great job. And I also just believe, I'm not a huge fan of comp. I'd like the rule set to be clear as possible to players, and I'm even not too concerned about Dragon so much, but I feel like scenarios might be the way to provide some sort of soft disincentives towards people running sort of lists that don't allow other people to play, or for them to be riskier in a tournament. But I felt like if they're going to put out, say, 3 more of these, or if you're a square-based listener, that seems to be the way they're going. I was very impressed from that balance of just what's a visual and an aesthetic experience as much as a gameplay one. It's sort of balanced both really well.
Alisdair, you said you and Alex both played competitively before. What does this compare to the terrain that was used back in the day?
Oh, look, the environment's changed extraordinarily in the decades since we were, TOs ourselves organizing events. And even, when I think 40K was probably the most point at which we got structured around terrain and that sort of thing. For Warhammer Fantasy Battles, there was rarely, if ever, more guidance other than put one piece of terrain per 24-inch square and have an array of things and roll a dice on a table of 24 options to see what piece of terrain it is. So this was really refreshing, and it was really nice just to look around and see everyone playing the same style of board matchup. It was all mirrored across everything. The terrain was was really stable. There was some small variation, I suppose. There was some sort of 2-tiered hills as opposed to some sort of, just broad flat ones, which, added a little bit of variety, I suppose, but also a little bit of complexity to the thing. I think it was really great. It's just changed so much, and it's nice to be able to walk into a tournament where all of this is arranged and taken care of, and you're not mucking around with it beforehand with your opponent deciding what's what. Everyone's really clear. You can just go in and play your game.
Yeah, makes a big difference. Setup and pack down always is about half the battle whenever I play.
Yeah.
But we've got a few minutes left, and I want to just kind of finish with, we'll stick with you, Alisdair, because you were saying you had one awful experience, for lack of a better word, but give me like a win from the tournament. What's something you took away, dice roll ideally, or moment in the game that you were like, that was sick?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll give you 2, only because one of them is just one of those. I spoke about bolt throwers in the list run through, and I stand by wholeheartly. The bolt throwers are one of the best war machines in the old world, particularly elven bolt throwers. But first game I had a marching column of longbeards supported by one of their mining carts, headed straight for me, and I think of a possible 6 wounds that it could have caused, the bolt thrower did 4. So wiping out 4 longbeards in a long line, was delicious. But the other one was, I was prepared for the eventuality, but not expecting it, where in my 3rd game rolling up magic, I rolled up 4 magical vortex spells. And so for the bulk of game 3, for the bulk of game 3, I had, on each of the sorceresses, the 2 level 2s, I had Vortex of Chaos up rolling around. And then the Supreme Sorceress had up both Black Horror and Summon Elemental Spirit. And it really did change that game in particular. Something that I didn't think about at the time, and I suppose it wasn't relevant, was the dangerous terrain on chariots, because they take D3 wounds rather than the standard one. And I reflect on it and just realize how much that changed my third game, having those vortexes up being a complete nuisance. But it did mean that, yeah, for the bulk of the day, for the bulk of the third game, I had 4 templates rolling around on the table, which is something I've never.
Just on the
Alex?
bolt throwers,
Yeah.
just on the bolt throwers, just to echo something, through a cascading amount of failing measurements and things like that, John actually managed to kill my sorcerer with a bolt thrower. He had He had one, and he did 1 shot, and he was on 2 wounds left, and he was gone.
That's awesome. What's a win for you though? What was one of your moments where you were, proud of your giant shag off?
Look. I do want to stick with one quick story, and this goes to Josh too. So the big bad, he's rolling around, toughness 5. He's beating down on dwarves, and little did I know that he was going to die to 7 or 8 rangers shooting his crossbows at them, all wounding, all failing all saves, failing the ward saves from Talisman of Protection, and the Shaggoth got taken out pretty much in 1 hit. But I think probably the highlight in terms of dice rolling was against our mate Chris, where we had this scenario where his Bruiser BSB charged a unit of 5 Forsaken, which, in the grand scheme of things, you think, okay, that's probably a good thing to have. His impact hits, I tanked on my ward save. His great weapon attacks, I tanked on my ward saves. I also rolled up the killing blow ability on the Forsaken boon table and managed to roll 3 6s to wound, taking out his bruiser in 1 hit. Yep. So that was probably the winning dice moment of the day. Sorry, Chris.
I remember.
I just want to jump on that and just say, if anyone does play Chaos Alex in future, be used to this. This is what he does. Just when everything is lost, every ward save passed. Just bring a bit of water to float those dice.
Everyone has that guy. That's the guy who can roll a 6 on command.
It's the GW dice. The GW dice.
Alex, brother Alex, I remember you sent me from the event a photo of like 6 face-up 6s. And out of 8 dice or something. What was that? Is that your win?
No, that was out of 12. I think it were 8 6s I rolled from 12. So you can imagine that was probably pretty good for me in many ways already. But there's so many of these things, and I don't want to take too much time, because there will be the battle reports, and it probably in every game maybe 3 moments that were pretty dramatic on the dice, and it's been a theme of the show we're trying to create, to just sort of, this is a feature, not a bug of the game, and that you're going to roll so many dice that you're going to roll the 6s and the 1s. You just don't know when they're going to come up. But for me, like, the moment really that was great was, you spend so much time theory hammering away at this game, and getting the list in advance is just great for me, but it becomes obsession as well. And I walked into Scott like with this dead idea of what I wanted to do, and on the first turn, because I always win the first turn, my skinks throw their javelins at the stone thrower and roll the 3 6s, like, that I need to poison, however that works in the old world, alchemically, to destroy it, maybe corrosive or something. And it was just like, it feels bad for him, it feels good for me, but I knew that was pretty much the 50% average, and it was just beautiful to see the plan come to fruition. And from there, like, it sort of went my way to an extent. But yeah, that was just like the relief of like, oh my God, I didn't roll 7 2s, at the start. So it was great. It was just to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the
edge
day,
off.
it's a game of dice, and the dice can change the entire thing. It's happened to everyone who plays it, I think, without a doubt. So always important to remember it, I guess. But we should probably wrap it up, because that's about half an hour. Which we're trying to keep it tight. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. I guess the lead out of this is that you should all get down to your local tournament, support it, and get amongst it, because it sounds like a pretty fun vibe. And I'll be keen to get down to one once the kids allow me to. But
sure.
Alisdair and Alex's thank you, and have a good night. Thank you everyone for watching as well.